the things that you're going to need for this project is a piece of plain fabric for your background. You need your piece to be at least 10 inches square. I've got mine a little bit bigger because I'd like to wrap it around a frame to finish, so I need a little bit of extra fabric around the edge, but at least 10 inches. I'm using Bella Light Lime of their solids, which is a very nice light green. It's slightly warmy yellow as opposed to a bluey kind of green. So you need that. You need a piece of stabilizer. I'm using Starlight Tearaway one, and you need that to be at least kind of 8 to 10 inches square. And then we need some freezer paper, which we're going to use for tracing. So freezer paper is the one where it's papery on one side and it's waxed on the other, which has the advantage that if you warm it up with an iron, it will temporarily stick. So we're going to use it to help draw. And you need some fabrics. I'll list these in the pattern. Well, I'll list everything in the pattern, but if you're not looking at the pattern, then you're going to need a taupe for the branch, and a beige and a warm brown, mid brown for the bird, so that's for the wren. And then we need, for the snowdrops, we need a green, sorry the light's a bit awkward here, but there's a green and a white. And for the catkins, a kind of muted yellowy browny kind of sludgy kind of colour. We'll brighten them up a little bit with some thread. So these are all batiks, and they're a type of batik called well, they're either watercolour batiks, polo batiks, smoke batiks. They've got different names, but basically they're just hand dyed. There's some variants, and they use things like salt and stuff to give a kind of textured effect, and they make the appliques look more complicated than they are. And if possible, do use batiks, because even this one, which looks absolutely plain, is still batik. They have a very high thread count, and it stops them fraying while you're working. So then on the threads, again, these are listed on the pattern. We've got a plain black, a kind of mossy green, a cool green, it's a plain black and a plain taupe. Now this is the one I'm going to use for outlining, so it's a little softer than I normally use. I normally use more of a saddle brown, but I want to use this taupe here. And we're going to be using a slightly lighter one again, and that's we're going to use that for like beaks and legs. And then for the snowdrops, we're going to be using this moss green, that's for the leaves. And for the kind of little green stripes and the stems, we're going to use that one, which is a little bit of a cooler green. And I'm going to be using this variegated citrus yellow for the catkins, a variegated cool brown, so creams and taupes, for the branch, and a variegated warm brown we're going to use for the wren. And the black I mentioned earlier is for the eye, and we've got a little bit of white, which I'm going to use the highlight on the wren, and possibly a little bit of touching up on the in fact, actually no, I'm going to use this one instead. So I'm going to use that for the eye. It's variegated white, so it's almost a plain white, and you can use a plain white if you can't get hold of something like that. I'm going to use this one, which is a variegated cream, and it goes quite nicely. It's kind of it's got the darker tones of this one, but I might use that on the wren just on some of the lighter sections, like on the chest. I'm going to use that. So that's everything you need, other than a pencil, a sharp pair of scissors, iron, and obviously you need a sewing machine which is capable of doing free motion, and a free motion foot on it. And that's everything you need. Just to add, if you do want to do quilting on it, you're going to need some wadding, a back fabric, and I'm going to be using this one, I think, to quilt it, which is a polyester variegated one in quite a very similar colour to that one. So it's a little bit darker than my background fabric, but I want to make them quite, in the illustration I did it all very kind of softly, but I'd like it a little bit brighter for the embroidery. So next you want to print out your template. The template is available from my website. And I'll put a link in the comments. There is a small fee for it. If you're really in a position that you don't want to pay for anything, then obviously you can just draw your own design and follow the instructions. But we now want to freeze the paper, matte side up, shiny side down. On my appliques you don't reverse anything, so we're just going to do it the other way. I notice sometimes you see people where they've obviously painstakingly reverse them. It's not necessary, so we don't need to do it. So trace around all of the dark outlines, ignore the thin outlines. So now we've got that all drawn out. With the beak, just draw, because there isn't a thick outline through the beak, so we're going to be adding that on. So just draw a straight line from the end of the between the two thick areas there. So just across like that. Right, so next we're just going to put a number alongside each of the different colour fabrics so that we don't miss any out. So like here, so I've put a little cross on there, you can just see it, and that's because there's nothing there, but it's sometimes it's just helpful to remind yourself that there's nothing there when you're cutting it out. So I'm going to have this as fabric number 1, fabric number 2, then 3 for these snowdrops, so there's 4 of those, 4 for the bit of green, and that's also 4 there, 5 for the branch, 6 for the catkins. It just means that when you're cutting it out, you're less likely to miss any of them. So next you need a sharp pair of scissors. I have a special pair of scissors that I use for these, and these are just a cheap, I think they're like £4 or £5 pair of scissors, because you are going to be cutting paper with them, so unless you're in the habit, it will eventually blunt your scissors. So, but they do need to be a nice pair of scissors. But the scissors aren't particularly expensive, unless you're buying the really fancy ones. So I just save them for this job, and then kind of every now and again I either sharpen them, or if they've gone past that stage I get a new pair. Generally Father Christmas brings me a pair each year. I think these were Father Christmas ones. So you want to cut out and to remove as much of this background. I mean, when you're tracing, I tend to just trace it absolutely flat, but you could have put it a bit closer as you're working if you wanted to save your freezer paper. So, and then put everything together in similar things. So we'll cut out all the easy bits first, which is where nothing's joined together. So on the bird, what we're going to do is we're going to very carefully separate him from this snowdrop section. Which is where it's helpful here to be able to see what's him and what isn't. Okay, like so. Which just leaves us with this section here, which has got both the leaves on and the snowdrop, and we're going to leave that as one piece. Okay, so next we want to start cutting things out, so you need to switch on your iron. So first we're going to be doing our wren. So take your piece of beige fabric and a sharp pair of scissors, which I've just put down somewhere. Found them. Right. So with sharp scissors, we're just going to cut round. So you can see the freezer paper has made it so that it's stuck nicely to our paper, which makes it very easy to cut out. Now, if you're very worried about your scissors, you could cut all this very neatly out, and then with a paper pair of scissors, and then you would only be cutting through the fabric. with fabric scissors, but I find it easier and quicker to do. So on the fabrics that I'm using are written in the pattern, and I also have a very limited number of kits, like 5 available for anyone who wants them. Otherwise you just need to use their own fabrics. So once you've done that, we're going to just trim away, and just that little bit there to remind me to miss that bit off, and we're going to cut out the wing and the top of his body, her body, his body. So we've got this nice warm brown next. So we're just cutting this shape out now. So press your piece of paper back on again, and you can stick it on quite a few times before it starts to have any issues. If you find it's peeling away as you work, just pause and iron it back down again. So the advantage of doing it this way is I have people who ask me why I bother, wasteful of fabric and everything, but it just gives us a nice base for our bird. You can tell where the pieces fit together. And it's really not a lot of extra fabric, and you've got no risk of anything shifting and getting a gap in the middle. So it's just the way I do it. I'm going to cut that little bit away at the tail where you can see her rear feathers. What's a polite way of saying it? See, and now this will fit exactly because it has no choice otherwise than to fit exactly. There you go. She's looking very pretty. So we'll just put her to one side for a second so they can all go. So next we're going to use this green. I'm going to cut this shape out, which has got this snowdrop in as well. Now when you're cutting it, you can, I'll tell you in a second. Okay, so I've got my green. So we're going to press this on here. Cut this out. But when we do this bit here, this bit's going to be behind the wren, so we can just leave it on because it's going to be, and then we haven't got a risk of anything not meeting there. So we'll just carry that on as if it was all one piece. When I'm cutting, you can, I'm sure you all know how to cut out, but it's often easier on these awkward shapes to move the fabric rather than the scissors. You just kind of close the scissors slowly and then rotate your piece of fabric, and you can then be pretty accurate as you're cutting. I mean, it doesn't matter too much because you're going to be, whatever shape you cut out, because you're reusing the paper again, there's going to be the shape that you cut out the second time as well, really. So like so, peel that away, and then that's going to go behind her, like so. Think about, I guess it must be about there. Well, we can overlay it later. So what we're going to do now is just trim down to remove those bits, and now we've just got the snowdrops, so we can cut those out of the white. So next we're going to do the brown branch. And you'll notice on the branch that some of the branch is thin lines and some of it is the thicker lines, so we're just cutting out that thicker section, and we'll extend those thin, really thin branches by embroidery, because these are already pretty thin to be trying to do as applique, so we're not going to push our luck. So the last bit to do is the catkins. Okay, next we need to get everything in position. So if you've got your template printed out, then because this background's nice and light, we can actually see pretty well just to, if you put your template underneath, centre it on your fabric, we can actually see through pretty well to lay these pieces out. Now we're not using any of the fusibles because I don't like them, and I don't think they're necessary, and they're expensive. And they gum up your needles and yuck. So let's not be using any of them. Oh, I don't think I've got that. That one goes there, that one goes there. Where my snowdrop's gone? Oh, it's underneath it. There we go, and that's all in place. So the rest of it's all down as the embroidery. So next you need a piece of stabilizer. So I'm just going to cut mine down a little bit because I seem to have got a big piece. And you can join the stabilizers and just overlap it if you've got pieces which aren't quite the right size. It's nicer if you can do it in one piece, but it's not essential. So we're going to take that off and just transfer it across. Yeah, my cat sat on my background fabric this morning, and it doesn't seem to matter how much I keep removing her fur, she keeps on. She's a pain, she is. Right, okay. So now we're going to go over to the sewing machine now.